This is the AI briefing from Bosio.digital. Today, everyone is selling you Agentic AI, and almost none of them can define it in a way you can actually use. Here's the plain version, the real failure rate behind the hype, and the one sentence most vendors will never say to you. You've heard the word Agentic more times this quarter than in your entire life before it. Every software vendor has bolted it onto their homepage. Every conference has a track. Every board deck has a slide. And almost none of it comes with a definition a busy leader can actually use to make a decision. So start with a number that should frame this whole conversation. Gartner predicts that more than 40% of agentic AI projects will be canceled by the end of 2027. Not because the technology failed, but because of escalating costs, unclear business value, and inadequate risk controls. A month earlier, MIT's Project Nanda looked at more than 300 enterprise AI initiatives and found that 95% showed no measurable return at all. The researchers were explicit. The cause was not the models. It was what they called an organizational learning gap, tools that don't retain feedback or adapt to how the business actually works. Hold those two facts next to the marketing, and you get the real shape of this moment. Agentic AI is simultaneously one of the most important shifts in enterprise software in a decade, and the category where the most money is currently being wasted. Both are true at once. And the gap between them is almost entirely about architecture and governance, the parts nobody puts on a homepage. Before we go further, a word on the fog around this term, because it's been stretched to mean almost anything. Gartner looked at the thousands of vendors claiming agentic AI and estimated that only around 130 of them actually offer genuine agentic capability. The rest, the firm says bluntly, is agent washing. Chatbots, robotic process automation, and assistants relabeled for the moment. When the market itself can't reliably tell agentic AI apart from its predecessors, a leader needs a working definition more than ever. So let's build one. Strip away the marketing, and agentic AI describes one specific behavior: software that pursues a goal across multiple steps, choosing its own actions along the way. IBM frames the operating loop in 4 moves: perceive, reason, act, and learn. A large language model plays the part that decides what to do next, based on what it just observed. The difference from the generative AI you already know isn't intelligence. It's autonomy. Generative AI produces content when you ask. Agentic AI decides what to do and does it. The cleanest working distinction comes from Anthropic's own engineering team, and it's worth adopting exactly as they wrote it. They separate workflows, systems where models and tools are orchestrated through predefined code paths, from agents, systems where models dynamically direct their own process and tool use. A workflow runs on rails you laid down in advance. An agent decides the route. Both count as agentic systems, and here's the part most vendors skip. Anthropic's own advice is to start with the simplest thing that works: a single model call or a fixed workflow. Escalate to full autonomy only when the task genuinely demands it. That advice matters because the failure data suggests most organizations are doing the opposite. Reaching for an autonomous agent when a simple workflow would have been cheaper, more reliable, and easier to govern. The question to ask a vendor isn't, is it agentic? It's, does this task actually need an agent? Or are you selling me an autonomy you'll have to babysit? The practical test comes down to 3 things working together. It takes multiple steps toward a goal without being reprompted at each one. It uses tools, it can search, call a system, or run code, rather than only producing text. And it adapts. If a step fails, it notices and tries something else. A model that only answers questions is generative. A script that runs the same fixed sequence every time is automation. Something that decides, acts, and adjusts across steps is an agent. Most of what gets sold as agentic fails at least one of those 3 tests. Because the term is being pasted onto older technology, the fastest way to understand it is by contrast. A chatbot is a tool you operate turn by turn. You ask, it answers, you ask again. It has no goal of its own and takes no action in your systems. Close the tab, and nothing continues. Generative AI, the broader category chatbots belong to, produces text, code, images, and summaries. It's extraordinary at drafting and analysis, but it's reactive. It generates when prompted and then waits. Robotic process automation is the one leaders most often mistake for agentic AI because both act inside your systems. But automation follows a fixed, brittle script. Click here, copy this, paste it there, and it breaks the moment the screen changes. An agent handles the same category of work, but reasons about it. Automation fails on an unexpected format. An agent adapts. The difference is the difference between a player piano and a musician. And here's the line that matters, and it isn't technical, it's managerial. A chatbot is a tool you use. An agent is work you delegate. Everything hard about agentic AI follows from that one word: delegation. That reframe is the whole point for a leader because you already know how to manage delegation. You do it with people every day. You don't hand a new hire the company card and full system access on day one. You scope what they can do, you check their work until you trust it, and you keep accountability for the outcome. Agentic AI is the same management problem in a new medium, and the organizations treating it as a management problem rather than a technology problem are the ones staying out of Gartner's 40%. Agents aren't a new idea. Researchers have chased them for years. 3 things came together recently to make them practically buildable. 1. Tool use became reliable. Modern models can decide to call an external function, a search, a database query, a calculation, and use the result rather than guessing an answer. That single capability turned a text generator into something that can act in the world. 2. A common standard emerged for connecting models to real systems. Late in 2024, Anthropic open-sourced the Model Context Protocol, a shared way to connect AI models to tools and data. Before it, every integration was a bespoke, brittle piece of engineering. This is the unglamorous plumbing that moved agents from demo to deployable. 3. Reasoning improved enough to plan. Newer models can break a goal into steps, sequence them, and correct course mid-task. The difference between a model that answers and a model that strategizes. None of this made agents easy. It made them possible. Which is exactly the moment a category fills with vendors claiming more than the technology can yet reliably deliver. Here's the part the vendor decks leave out, and it's the most useful part to internalize. The current failure rate isn't an anomaly. It's the expected state of a category this young. MIT's researchers found that despite tens of billions in enterprise AI spending, only about 5% of integrated pilots were extracting measurable value. Their diagnosis didn't blame the models. The systems they wrote do not retain feedback, adapt to context, or improve over time. In other words, companies bought intelligence and forgot to build the memory, the context, and the feedback that would let that intelligence compound. They hired a brilliant new employee and gave them no onboarding, no access to how the company actually works, and no manager. Of course, it stalled. McKinsey's most recent survey fills in the adoption picture. 88% of organizations now use AI in at least one function, but only about a third have begun to scale it at the enterprise level, and just 6% qualify as, quote, AI high performers with a real bottom-line impact. Deloitte's research adds the governance gap directly. Close to 3/4 of companies plan to deploy agentic AI within 2 years, but only about 1 in 5 report a mature governance model for their agents. The intent is nearly universal. The readiness is rare. The most instructive story in the category is Klarna's. The fintech's AI customer service assistant handled 2.3 million conversations in its first month. It automated about 2/3 of the chat volume and cut average resolution time from 11 minutes down to under 2. It was projected to drive tens of millions in profit improvement. It was the poster child for agentic customer service. Then the company's own CEO publicly acknowledged they had cut human staff too aggressively. They began rehiring specialist human agents to handle the complex, ambiguous, emotionally charged cases the AI couldn't. Klarna isn't a story about AI failing. It's a story about a company learning exactly where the line between delegation and abdication sits, and having to walk back across it. That line is the whole game. So what does this actually mean if you run a company between 50 and 5,000 people? The honest framing is different from what you'll hear at an enterprise conference. You don't have a dedicated AI function, a governance office, or a research team. That sounds like a disadvantage. In two specific ways, it's an advantage, and in one specific way, it's a real risk. The advantage is proximity. In a mid-market company, the person who understands the workflow, the person who can change it, and the person who owns the outcome are usually in the same room. Sometimes they're the same person. You can redesign a real process around an agent in weeks without the change committee drag that slows a much larger enterprise to a crawl. The best early use cases are unglamorous and internal. Triaging inbound support, drafting and routing routine correspondence, reconciling data across systems, watching for exceptions and escalating the ones that matter. Work that's high volume, rule-bounded, and expensive in human hours where an imperfect result is cheap to catch and correct. The risk is the mirror image of the advantage. McKinsey's data shows agent adoption is concentrated in functions that already have strong technical governance, software engineering, and knowledge management among them. A mid-market company deploying autonomous agents without that scaffolding is structurally the population most likely to land in Gartner's 40% cancellation bucket, not least likely. Which leads to the most important sentence in this whole briefing, and the one most vendors will never say to you. Most mid-market companies should not deploy autonomous agents yet. They should build the architecture that makes agents safe and valuable first. And for many workloads, a well-designed workflow beats an agent on cost, reliability, and sleep at night. That isn't caution for its own sake. It's the pattern that separates the 6% of high performers from everyone else. The companies getting real value didn't buy more agents. They built the conditions, shared context, structured instructions, governance, feedback that let even a modest amount of AI compound. Now the governance question, because it's where most companies get stuck. The instinct, when you hear autonomous software acting inside your systems, is to demand a human approve every single action. That's the right instinct on day 1 and the wrong operating model by day 100, and the data now shows why with real precision. Anthropic studied how people actually supervise agents over time, using its own coding tool. Users with fewer than 50 sessions let the agent act automatically about 20% of the time. By 750 sessions, more than 40% did. Trust grew, but gradually and never into blind trust. The striking finding is that experienced users intervened more often, not less, even as they granted more autonomy. They shifted from pre-approving every action to watching outcomes and stepping in when something looked wrong. We'd call that destination human above the loop, rather than human in the loop. In the loop means a person approves each step, necessary early, but it doesn't scale, and it wastes the very advantage the agent was supposed to provide. Above the loop means the human sets the goals, defines the boundaries, and judges the outcomes the system produces. Engaged oversight, not step-by-step approval. The shift only works when the architecture is trustworthy enough that you can step back without losing control. Without that architecture, you're stuck in the loop forever, which is why so many agent pilots quietly turn into expensive supervised demos. Getting there means deciding, explicitly, how much autonomy each agent gets, and letting it earn more over time, exactly the way you'd manage a new hire. Researchers have proposed a 5-level framework for this, running from a human doing every step, all the way to the system operating almost entirely on its own. You don't grant that top level of independence on a task that touches money or customers right away. It has to earn real trust at a much more supervised level first. And governance cannot be bolted on at the model layer alone. Anthropic's own framework for trustworthy agents states it plainly. The model layer alone cannot secure agentic AI. Trust is a property of the whole system: the model, the tools it can reach, the data it can touch, the environment it runs in. This is also the honest place to name where outside help earns its fee because it's the hardest part to do from inside. Defining autonomy levels is simple on a whiteboard. Enforcing them across real systems is a different matter. Building the audit trail a regulator or a board will accept, and holding the accountability rhythm as agents multiply, is organizational work that competes with everyone's day job. The test to apply to us or to any firm is simple. Does the engagement leave you owning the governance model or dependent on the vendor to run it? If it's the latter, keep looking. If you take one thing from this briefing, take the sequence, because the order is where most companies go wrong. They start by buying agents. They should start by building the conditions agents need. The first move isn't a purchase, it's a map. Pick one real process that costs meaningful hours and where a mistake is cheap to catch. Understand it well enough to redesign it, because dropping an agent onto a broken process just automates the breakage faster. This is also where the honest question gets answered. Workflow or agent. Many of the highest value wins are fixed workflows, not autonomous agents, and they're cheaper and safer. The second move is context and structure. An agent is only as good as what it knows about your business and how clearly its job is defined. The companies in MIT's successful 5% had built the memory and context that let their systems improve. The other 95% hadn't. The third move is governance before autonomy, in exactly the progression we just walked through. Start every agent as a closely supervised assistant, watch it, and grant more independence only as it earns your trust. Cap what it can spend and touch. Keep a human above the loop. Do those three in that order, and you're building what the 6% of high performers built. Reverse them, buy agents first, then scramble for context and governance after the invoice or the incident arrives. That's what 40% of companies will cancel within 2 years. The technology is the same in both stories. The sequence is the whole difference. That's the work we do for our own firm first. That's where we learned it. And then, for mid-market companies who'd rather own the system that runs their business on AI than rent a collection of agents they can't govern. Agentic AI is genuinely one of the most important shifts in a generation. It will also cancel most of the projects chasing it. Which of those two stories your company lands in has very little to do with the model you choose, and almost everything to do with what you build underneath it. That was this week's briefing. What agentic AI actually is and why the deciding factor was never the model. The full article is on the site. Every source, the governance framework in full, and the 3 move starting sequence you can apply this week. This has been the AI briefing from Bosio Digital, where AI transformation starts with your people. Thanks for listening.